Welcome to Wonderspace. It's great to have you on board. My name is Steve Cole, and over the past 65 episodes, I have been asking the same 6 questions to amazing people from around the world. The questions orbit around wonder and stories of hopefulness, and the setting for each journey is this shared window on the space station, from where we see everything from a different perspective. Before we introduce our guest this week, our friends at AskNatureorg are going to help us to re-wonder.
When a bud or leaf begins to form at the tip of a spiral-growing plant, it produces hormones and physical pressure that deter the next growth from beginning right next to it. So the second develops at 180 degrees from the first. The third growth forms at a slightly lesser angle to the second because the first growth is still repelling it as well. Following this pattern, each placement is influenced by the position of the growths before it, in a physical manifestation of Fibonacci's famous addition sequence. Visually, this creates mind-boggling patterns of spirals, but practically, it means leaves don't overshadow one another, and seeds, flowers, and other parts efficiently fill all the space available to them.
Our orbit this week will provide great views over cities such as Rome and Athens. And to experience these views with us in this ultimate window seat, we welcome Jon Alexander. Jon is the author of a new book called Citizens and the co-founder of the new Citizenship Project, which is a strategy and innovation consultancy that aims to shift the dominant story from consumer to citizen. Jon was nominated by the director of Panahpur, James Perry.
I met Jon Alexander when he had just started the new Citizenship Project, and he told me how we had been given the identity of subjects before then more recently being given the identity of consumers, and how if we wanted to solve our challenges, we urgently needed to adopt a new identity, an identity of citizens. And it was a message which blew my mind and made a huge difference to my life. I hope you really enjoy listening to him.
The full-length interview can be heard on the Wonderspace podcast, which can be found on our website and on most podcast platforms. For this video orbit, Jon answers 4 of our 6 questions, and I start by asking Jon, if we could do a fly past on any part of the world that is significant to you, which place, city or country would it be and why?
So I'm going to take you to Athens, and I love the way someone described it to me the other day as north of the global south and east of the global west. But obviously you won't be surprised to hear that the reason why I'm talking about it is because of its place in the history of democracy. And what's so phenomenal about it today is that there's these layers of history kind of piled up on top of one another. And yet you can see sort of the Piraeus that the Chinese now own, and like all of the tensions of current geopolitics are there in that place. And yet you can see it standing in a place where democracy really functioned entirely differently and in a fundamentally participatory, deliberative basis that I think can also sort of help us understand that we could do it very differently in our future as well. So there's this sort of combination of the history and the future and the west and the east and the north and the south, and all kind of jumbled into one place. I love Athens for that. So, I mean, I guess I'd take you back first to university. I did a degree in classics, as you might guess from my previous answer, but also, but mainly a degree in sport. I was rowing all the way through and didn't do much else, if I'm totally honest. And I stumbled out of that and fell into the advertising industry, actually. But then sort of started asking deeper and deeper questions about the role of those industries in the world over time. My first boss described my job to me saying, the average consumer sees something like 3,000 commercial messages a day, and your job is to cut through that. And for a while, with my kind of sportsman competitive instinct, I really liked the challenge of cutting through. And then I began to think 3,000 a day, and to ask questions about what really we were doing in the world and what we're doing to ourselves and each other when we are surrounded with this story that we are consumers, that on that regular basis. I actually went to a pretty dark place for a while. Like, there was at one point in time when I was starting to come out of the industry. I started working with various people to sort of really study what that level of advertising, that ubiquity of advertising in our lives does in terms not just of the economy or material consumption, but actually like really deeply to our imaginations and our ideas of what's possible, our ideas of what our role can be, beyond just limiting it really to choosing between options that someone else offers, rather than inviting us to participate in the world as creative, collaborative, caring creatures that we are as human beings. And I came to see the story, the consumer story, as I now call it, as really a kind of quite a fundamentally kind of shaping thing in our world. And what I wanted to ask was, how might we use the same sorts of skills, but to tell a different story, to open up maybe the best of humanity, rather than sort of preach a self-interest. And what came out of that was an organisation ultimately called the New Citizenship Project. My old friend from the advertising industry, Irene Akashis, dragged me out of a return to academia, which looked like happening at the time, and we started doing work with this idea. And now we talk about a shift from actually a story that came even before the consumer story. We talk about a shift from subjects, the subject story, which tells us that the right thing to do is keep our heads down and do as we're told, to the consumer story, which says that the right thing to do is to look out for number one, and into what we call the citizen story, which says actually the right thing to do is to get involved, that the best way forward for society as a whole is to tap into the ideas and energy and resources of everyone, because all of us are smarter than any of us, and if we do that, we can actually create a far better future. But the challenge is just to create the conditions for that to be possible, and that's a lot of those ideas are what's in the book I've just written, called Citizens: Why the Key to Fixing Everything is All of Us. So if I may, I'm going to take you into the realm of government and take you to Taiwan, actually, and back first to about 2012, when the government of Taiwan was really trying to say to people, just shush little people, just be consumers, like, we know that's what you want to do, we'll look after everything that matters. They had this thing called the Economic Power-Up Plan, and it was in large part actually because they were starting to negotiate a big trade deal which would have ceded a lot of the country's sovereignty and agency to China. And what happened at that time was a group of hackers started to organise. They called themselves GovZero, and what they did was they built websites, parallel websites to government websites in Taiwan, with the URLs ending g0v.tw, hence GovZero. And on these websites, they were enabling people to essentially participate in shadow government, like vote on things, upvote things, downvote things, comment, and really sort of say to people, like, government isn't something that should be done for us, government is something that we should all be involved in. And this kind of grew over time, and then 2014 came, and there was, and the trade bill with China came to Parliament and started to be kind of rushed through, and a protest kicked off. Occupy-style protest, students occupied the Parliament, and the GovZero gang brought in a broadband connection and streamed what the students were doing all over the country, and what they were doing was debating the clauses of the trade bill. And what happened then was the critical moment. So the Speaker of the Parliament had pressure put on him to boot the students out, and he said no, because this is what democracy looks like, this is what this place is for. Speaker Wang, who would be my one person if I had to pick one out of this, even though there are more famous individuals from this story. He for sort of opening that space, I think, is the big hero. But from there, the whole of the way Taiwan works has transformed. One of the leaders of the hacker movement became a mentor to a government minister, and then after the next presidential election in 2016, became a minister herself. She then led the country's response to the COVID pandemic, which has been one of the most most successful anywhere in the world, and has been rooted in the principle of treating everyone in Taiwan as a participant and a source of ideas and energy and resource in that, as I've said before, in that work. My favourite example of that is they set up a phone line where any citizen could ring in with ideas for how the country's response could be better. And there's this lovely story of how a 6-year-old boy rang up and suggested involving the baseball team in making face masks cool. And 3 days later, not only was the boy on the national press conference, but so were half the Taiwanese baseball team in their face masks. So, and I just think that's so different to what we might imagine, but it is happening on a national scale in the world now. And I think the idea and the example that sets of how we could reinvent our democracy, reinvent our society, all be involved in shaping the future together, I think is mind-blowing. Well, the other one I thought about was Zelensky, actually. So, I mean, the way he's leading at the moment is absolutely in this space as well, like addressing the citizens of Russia as explicitly not as president, but as a citizen of Ukraine, and like inviting the world to participate in open source intelligence gathering and you just imagine what we could do if other leaders were to follow that. I guess two things really. The first is the insight, as it were, which is, I mean, humans are citizens by nature, I think is what I would say to you. We're only consumers because we tell ourselves so constantly that we are. The need isn't to teach people to be better. The need is to get out of our own way and unleash what we're capable of. And I guess in that spirit, I would leave you with a question, and it's where I end the book, actually, which is the question, like, what would you do in this time if you truly believed in yourself and in those around you? Like, if you really believed that people are citizens by nature, believed in your own power, what would you do?
To find out more about the work of Jon, go to jonalexander.net and newcitizenship.org.uk. To engage with the previous 65 Wonderspace episodes, go to our website, ourwonder.space. I want to thank Jon for joining us on Wonderspace, and I hope you can join us next week for more wonders and stories of hopefulness.